Call the meeting to order. Roll call, Mr. Parati.
Mr. Accomando, Mrs. Borelli,
Present.
Mr. Buffi, Mr. Quinn,
Here.
Ms. Sanchez,
Present.
Mrs. Canicaco,
Here.
Mr. Singh,
Here.
Mrs. Zattarelli,
Present.
Mr. Geary.
Present. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Adequate notice of this meeting has been sent to all members of the Board of Education and recorded in the record in accordance with the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, 1975.
We have a number of presentations tonight. Our first one, I'll introduce Dave Rowe, who will introduce Ann Jager with our first presentation.
Hi, how's everybody? I was thinking with Ann before we were going to begin this presentation to find out how long the reading reinforcement program has been running. In my introduction, I wrote several years, but after a brief discussion with her, I found out we've had an operation for at a minimum of 8 years. It's a summer reading reinforcement program that's been operating at Long Elementary. It runs during the month of July. It does a great job of getting kids to read over the summer and also to develop a love of reading. And Ann has been part of that program since its inception 8 or 9 years ago. And I'm going to ask her to speak today to everybody because as I talk to people about the program, I'm always surprised at how few people actually know about it. And it's a very positive thing that we do for the community, so we'd like to share it with everyone.
Alright, so I'm here to present about the summer reading program. As Mr. Rowe said, I've worked with the group for a few years. So some program details. There are usually 20 or more students, and they range in age from 3rd grade up until 6th grade. We meet in the Long Memorial School Library and the computer lab. We meet for 2 hours a day, 3 times a week, for 3 weeks in July. And the students are recommended by their special education teachers, and parents receive an invitation usually after their IEP. We review multi-sensory reading strategies for decoding. We work on improving vocabulary through context clues, use reference materials. We practice reading fluency, listen for comprehension, and summarize fiction and nonfiction texts. But as Dave said, the big thing that we want to work on is developing a lifelong love of reading. So we try and pick books that will be interesting, kind of unusual, maybe not things they would read during the regular school year. For instance, in the summer of 2012, we read The Strange Case of Origami Yoda and Darth Caper Strikes Back. We practiced following written directions. We made lightsabers. We made Origami Yoda. You can see my Origami Yoda right there. And we wrote letters to the author, Tom Engelberger. We never heard back. Then in the summer of 2013, we kind of did a camp theme. So we read the Summer Camp Mysteries by, it's a series of books that's called Camp Jansen. It's about a girl, and she solves mysteries. We practiced following written directions again. We made friendship bracelets, we made God's eyes, we made s'mores in the microwave, because you can't have campfires in school. And we analyzed story elements with picture books. So we took a bunch of books out from the Salvo Library and just went to town with all of these different books. The kids loved the books, and it was great that we got them from the library because they could see that when I returned them, they could get them. So that was kind of an exciting time. And then last summer, we did a little bit of cryptozoology. So we talked about animals that you can't really prove scientifically exist, but the kids were interested in them. So we did The Abominable Snowman Doesn't Roast Marshmallows, Sea Monsters Don't Ride Motorcycles, and we made a timeline of events about the Loch Ness Monster, which kind of convinced us that probably wasn't true, but it wasn't a real creature. We made a map of Bigfoot sightings on Prezi, and we showed where all the different Bigfoot animals exist throughout the world, and we named them. Read a couple of picture books as well. And then for this year, what we have planned is looking at exploring graphic novels and comics, and that can include nonfiction, fiction. A couple of those up there are nonfiction. And we're going to read and study graphic novels and comics, make vocabulary comics, so explain vocabulary words through a comic. We're going to allow the students time to research some topics that they might be interested in making a comic about. Create interactive, use technology to write comics, and then create interactive comics using a device called Makey. And I actually have Makey that I have set up in the back if anybody would like to see. It's a 5th grade comic they made with me in my support class about Newton's first law, which is an object in motion tends to stay in motion, an object at rest tends to stay at rest. And then when you put on the bracelet and you touch the button, it completes an electrical circuit through your body, and it makes the sounds that the children chose to have in their comics. So hopefully that'll get them excited. It'll be including comics and drawing and a topic that they're interested in and technology. So it kind of hits a lot of stuff that children are already interested in. And that's it. That's the whole summer reading program. So if anybody has any questions, I'm available. And if you want to check out the Makey, it'll be there for the rest of the night.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I mean, sometimes people don't realize, but over the summer, if you're not reading and you're not still learning, there's a lot of opportunity for regression. And so not only is this a great program for the students that are there with Mrs. Jaeger, but it's obviously made to be very high interest and is very skill based. So we appreciate all the work and certainly thank you for the presentation tonight too. Next is John Lawler, our middle high school principal. One of our major goals this year is for the high school, but it was also something at the district level, was improving our college and career readiness ratings in our school performance reports. And one of the major parts of that was our administration of the PSATs to all of our sophomores and juniors. So Mr. Lawler is here tonight to present on those. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Katz, and good evening, members of the Board of Education and the public. Thank you for giving me a few minutes to share one of our major initiatives this year, which was the administration of the PSAT to all sophomores and juniors. First off, I'd like to thank the board for supporting that initiative, as it is very important, and you'll see in the next few minutes why. I'm going to share with you the data from the results of the test, as well as what it means, and how we're applying it to improve our programs at Southwood High School. What you see here are the average scores. On the left are for your juniors, and on the right for your current sophomores. What those numbers mean and how they actually translate to the regular SAT. If you're familiar at all with the test, if you can add a 0 to the end of each one of those numbers, is roughly how it would translate to an SAT score. So the average score here would be for a junior getting a 410 in reading and a 430 on the math. For us folks my age and a little bit older, you combine those two. So the writing portion was added later on. And that would be your combined SAT score. And the same thing for the sophomores as well. These two charts break down how our students fared compared to the average. And the average on an SAT would be a 500. 500 or greater would be considered average. So as you can see, our juniors currently in critical reading, only 14% scored at the average or greater on the PSAT, which would be equivalent on the SAT. For math, 23%. The numbers aren't really that far, actually in some ways better for our sophomores, who scored a 16% in critical reading and 20% in math. The numbers below are pretty alarming. And we're not here to hide anything or how the results are, because again, this is what we're starting with and what we're going to put in place to address these scores. The percentage scoring 400 or below in critical reading is 36% of our current juniors. 31% for math. The sophomores, 45% scored lower than 400, would score lower than 400. And for the math, 44%. What's new this year is with the introduction of new PARCC assessments, the PSAT is being allowed to be used for our current juniors next year as a graduation requirement. Since the PARCC is new, and everybody understands that there's going to be some issues to be worked out over the next several years, the PSAT is one of assessments that a student can demonstrate proficiency in to graduate. along with the SAT, the PARCC, the ACT, the AccuPlacer, which a student might take when they're going into college to determine their placement, as well as the ASVAB, which is the military's battery for different locations. The state has set this number, this benchmark of greater than a 40 on the PSAT to be used as a graduation requirement. So as you can see here, for our current juniors, 65% of them would be able to be using this assessment for a graduation requirement for the reading and 59% for the math. The numbers are pretty close again for our current sophomores, 56% for both reading and math. And we try to stress this to our staff and students that, especially as we just finished up the second round of PARCC, to urge our students to take it. And I'm sure you read the newspapers and turn on the television, you see all these movements for students to refuse to take it. We encouraged our students that PARCC might be their best pathway to graduation. I think, considering some of the turnout we saw in some of these other districts, where 2/3 of schools were opting out of the PARCC, we did very well. We had a very low number of students refusing to take the PARCC. So we're really happy about that. But again, we want to see these numbers go up. Another neat thing with the PSATs is they give you what's called AP potential statistics. And what these are forecasts. Depending on how students do on the PSAT will determine how well they will do in AP or advanced placement courses. And based on those numbers, this is how we figured our students who would score on a 5-point scale for the AP a 3 or higher. And these were the numbers that we came into it. And why is this important? It gives our counselors, it gives our teachers another measure to encourage students who may not have thought about taking an advanced placement course. Maybe this is something that for me it's too challenging. Well, look, you did very well on a PSAT. There's a good chance based on these results that you will be successful in these AP courses. So again, in addition to teacher recommendations, in addition to their grades and their current courses, this could be used as another measure to encourage students to take these more advanced, challenging courses. And the numbers we're going to see is a trend of increasing. What you see in front of you on the left are our numbers for advanced placement enrollment. And again, these are courses that have the equivalent if students do a certain proficiency or higher on the final assessment where they can earn credits in college. So on the left, we have 2 years ago, we had 56 students enrolled in AP courses. For our current year, 94 students. And we're really proud and excited to say with all the work that we've done for next year, we have currently 124 students who are ready to take AP classes. And if you look at the names of the courses on the right, you can see that it's through a combination of adding new offerings and really giving students who have aptitudes in different disciplines an opportunity to take courses like this, whether they are strong in the sciences or math, or maybe they're really into studio art, or maybe they're big on the humanities and there's other history courses that are available for them. There's the trend that we can see moving up. And this is important because on the next slide you're going to see how the New Jersey Department of Education rates schools in the state of New Jersey based on what they determine as college and career readiness. And really the two major factors for that are the number of students that are taking tests like the PSAT and SAT. So again, by having every one of our students in sophomore, junior taking that test, that number will increase. As well as the number of students that are taking advanced placement courses. And as you can see, currently, we are determined to be lagging in performance not only across the state, but also in our peer groups as well, or communities that have similar demographics as Saddlebrook. Now listen, I'm optimistic because these reports, whether it's the New Jersey Monthly Magazine report that comes out every year rating high schools, or the New Jersey reports from the Department of Education, these are lagging indicators. So all the great work that we're doing this year and next year, we're going to start to see those reports and those results increase. I'm really excited about that. But again, this is more than just about having more kids take a test or more kids taking an advanced placement course. We want to see students doing better. We want to see them getting better scores on the SAT and the PSAT. We want to see them getting 3 4s and 5s on the AP exams. So we're doing a lot of work with the help of our supervisors and our administrative team to improve the programs across the board. Our SAT prep course is piloting the redesigned test. The whole SAT is going through a change in how it's delivered and how the students are assessed. Our kids are going to test it here in Saddlebrook. That information will help our teachers prepare our students better. We're currently updating our Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry curriculum. As the new PARCC came out, we realized that, our pacing is not where it should be. Our students are not covering enough in Algebra 1 that they need to. They're actually hitting it now in Algebra 2. So it's a really change and shift in focus. We've been reorganizing our 7-12 English Language Arts department to improve collaboration and communication so we can see the practices that are happening in our middle school and carried all through into our high school. And of course, with our special education department, adding new services, giving students more support. Right, we're adding in-class resource for our freshman and English class. In our Spanish classes, they're going to have special education support. And a whole new level of service called Console. It gives students more freedom, but still give them and their teachers the support that they need. And that's it for my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time. Thank you very much for your attention and your support. There's a lot of good things going on here, and having your backing is very important.
Through the chair, what grades are AP classes offered? Is it 9 through 12?
That's an excellent question. Traditionally, AP courses were offered for grades 11 and 12. What's exciting about this year coming up, through the process of redesigning our curriculum, particularly in our history department over the last 3 years, we're able to offer an AP Advanced Placement World History course for freshmen. So that's something brand new. And again, that's how you're seeing these numbers rise, because traditionally students in grades 11 and 12 would have to make those tough choices. You know what, I really would like to take, this history course, but it's running up against a biology class, and now I have to pick. So by offering it through grades 9 through 12, there's more options. And there's more rigorous classes for those students coming out of our middle school to say, you know what, Southwood High School is a destination. I don't need to go to, a private school or the Bergen Academies. There's challenging courses right off the bat. So, yes.
So for this school year, the AP number, that number 94, that's for 11th to 12th graders?
The current number, the current school year is majority of 11th and 12th graders, correct?
Okay,
But
then next year, freshmen will be included in that 124?
That is correct. There's freshmen in that 124. In addition to the world history, we've also added an AP environmental course, environmental science, and that is also be available to freshmen coming into next year. Also, the other piece of that is the culminating AP Spanish course that's really been in the works for the past 5 or 6 years with a program that started in our middle school. That first cohort from 5 or 6 years ago will now be in that AP course as seniors. So we're really proud of those kids. They've gone through the whole grade 7 through 12 Spanish program.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Walden? Okay.
Sorry. You were giving us on the PSATs the juniors versus sophomores. Is there any figures that give any indication of the growth expected for the sophomores between taking it as a sophomore and a junior?
You taking it the second time around, what kind of growth can we anticipate?
Because right now they're about even, but one would hope anyway there's a growth between the sophomore year and junior year as far as scores go. Is there any data on that?
Mr. Quinn, I do not have that at my disposal for tonight. I can look into that and get back to you. But I agree with you that by taking that test for the first time as sophomores and then taking it again as the juniors, I would anticipate that those numbers would increase. Because again, you're taking away those unknown factors of sitting for a high stakes assessment for the first time. So we anticipate that in addition to all the great work that our staff's doing to prep these students, that just again by sitting it for a second time around, we will see improvements.
Thank you.
Anyone else? There's one more question, Mr. Walden. I know a lot of the initiatives that we've put into effect over the last year or two have not really been taken effect into the scores. Are there any other initiatives that you think we can look into to improve even going further?
Well, I think what you bring up is an excellent point, because again, these reports that come out, whether it's the school performance report or the ones that are coming out in these private magazines about the ratings, they lag about what's, in terms of what's actually happening in the year and the year ahead. What you see up there, we're increasing these numbers not just by throwing the doors open and saying, hey, anybody wants to take an AP class, just go ahead and sign up and see how you do. Because the numbers wouldn't be good in the end. The students would struggle, they'd be placed in the wrong place. We're doing it in a very thoughtful, meticulous way. The Spanish program, as I just mentioned, took 5 years in the making for those kids now to sit for the first time for an AP class. The AP World History, that plan goes back 3 years in how they redesigned the curriculum from grades 7 through 9. So again, these things do take a lot of time, but again, there is patience needed. But as your question about other initiatives, there's a lot of great things going on. K-12, just the fact that I know the presentation coming up is an update on the curriculum process. That's going to pay huge dividends as all 3 of our elementary schools are put onto the same page, so that when they come up into 7th grade, the teachers can jump ahead right away as opposed to not trying to pull students together from 3 different schools. So that's going to pay huge dividends, having the curriculum in place for grades 7 to 12. She put me on the spot, so I'll let my colleagues to step in, and I'm sure they'll be able to add to that as well.
All right, Mr. Lower, thank you very much. As you said, the scores aren't exactly where we want them to be right now, but I think the initiatives that you spoke about speak for themselves, and we know that that's going to come, so thank you.
Thanks.
Our final 3 presentations are from Christine Steiner and Chris Duval, our content area supervisors. The first one being about our curriculum writing plan, which, well, this is the order in the agenda, but you may be going in a different order. You are? Okay, I'll let you speak about it. Just go ahead, wherever you'd like to start.
Good evening. We're back. So we have our update. We talked to you guys, what was that, October, November? More than a week ago, right? We probably all forgotten. But way back last fall, we were discussing with you all the exciting plans that we had, our vision for curriculum and instruction. So we said that we'd report back to you towards the end of the school year. So it's towards the end of the school year, and here we are. So for tonight, for our agenda, what we decided to focus on for you, Christine's going to kick us off with talking about full-day kindergarten and teaching strategies goals. And then we're going to discuss with you all the different things we've done in terms of professional development for improving the curriculum and programs, focusing on instruction and assessment, the different articulation efforts that we have ongoing, both horizontally and vertically, and then looking ahead with our game plan for how we're going to be tackling writing, updating the curricula K-12.
So you just heard about the high school experience, and I'm going to take you all the way to the other end of the spectrum. And I want to talk about our initiative this year to implement full-day kindergarten. It's a huge undertaking, and when you think about it, you say, okay, we're doubling the amount of time that our students are spending in our classrooms while they're kindergartners. But we really want to do more than just increase that time. We want to ensure that we're using it in a different way than we had before. So it really was a matter of re-envisioning what our expectations were for kindergartners. So we began this process by meeting with the kindergarten teachers over the summer. And we really wanted to set some clear expectations about the structure of our program and what sort of practices we would expect to be in place to ensure that students are actively engaged in the learning process, as they need to be at those ages particularly. So we talked about a huge array of things, everything from what your daily schedule was going to be and what that looked like. So when we talked about, okay, we needed to have time for our students to be writing, what does writing in kindergarten look like? And how do you do that? And how do we engage them and ensure that we're meeting the needs of all students? We talked about maintaining a child-centered, developmentally appropriate approach. What does that mean and what does that look like? And got very specific. We talked about walking into the room and what would you see and how would you organize your materials. When you're talking about kindergartners who are this tall and you put things way up on the top shelf or you hang things at the top of the classroom, we want to maintain and remember that this was about an experience about our 5-year-olds and to structure everything we do right down to the physical arrangement of your classroom so that it's inviting and engaging and that students had ownership over that space and how to use it. We talked about technology integration and how can we make it as simple as possible, and our students are walking in the door with a lot more knowledge than we ever had when we were that age, and so how can we harness that and use it for our instructional purposes. We had a guest. We had Chris's son FaceTime in with us and showed them the applications of connecting with people beyond the 4 walls of their classroom. And not to be forgotten, we talked about what the expectations were in the Common Core standards, particularly in math and language arts. And if those are the expectations of the standards, how can we ensure that our instruction is matching that? And that was just the first 2 days worth of conversations that we had. We didn't want it to be a one and done conversation, so we talked about structuring ongoing supports and conversations throughout the course of this school year. So we structured quarterly meetings with a goal of really building the collaboration that was taking place between the teachers across buildings, really in an effort to build consistency. As John mentioned before about, having all of our schools with a common vision and a common approach, let's start right from the beginning with kindergartners. And we don't want great things happening in the classrooms in one of our buildings that we don't have an opportunity to share and have in the classrooms of all of our buildings. And so we talked beyond just the standards, but then we began to really dig into them and organize them and group them into what I call focus standards, where we went through the standards, we said, all right, these are the ones that we're going to really focus on in the fall, and we went through the entire year that way, and it helped organize teachers' thinking. They were able to structure their plans for the year much more fluidly and thematically by having that focus. We revisited the schedule, what was working, what wasn't, where do we need to tweak it. Those who looked at the proposed schedule online saw that it said rest time, and so that wound up being phased out fairly quickly in the fall because our students came in ready, they adjusted to the full day, so we repurposed that time and we made it more of a small group quiet time, and teachers were able to reinforce skills that had been learned during other segments of the day. We went back to developmentally appropriate practices. We talked about what 5 and 6-year-olds look like, how do they learn, so that knowing those things, how do you design experiences and programs that built upon where those students were starting. This led us into a conversation about assessment, which then talked about student progress, which then naturally led to a conversation of having those conversations with parents and informing them of that information, which brought us to report cards. And we looked at how exactly we want to structure information to share with parents in a meaningful way. And so that's something that we'll be revising moving into next year. As we transitioned, the focus was always on how can we make this better? And we stopped along the way to look at what did we accomplish through this process. And part what I'll get to later is we got feedback from teachers of what they were experiencing, what were they noticing, and these are really a lot of the accomplishments through the course of the year, was being able, with that full day structure, with the instructional approaches that we were utilizing, students were really able to study topics much more in depth than had happened in the past. There were many more exploratory, hands-on experiences. It wasn't just, great, I have 10 minutes, let's talk about this topic, great, now we have to race on to the next thing. The structures that were put in place, using a center approach and using free choice time, students were able to revisit topics and ideas that they had begun to explore the day before. There's no longer this rushed feeling, and students could enjoy their learning instead of feeling like we were constantly racing on to the next thing. We've been able to build a much more consistent classroom experience for our students, using common approaches, using that schedule that we've put in place. And teachers are maintaining a focus on student growth and development, and really looking at how students are performing in order to structure goals moving forward. If Sally is displaying certain behaviors and characteristics or knowledge of a topic, what is my goal going to be for that child? And it might be different than the goal that you're structuring for the child sitting next to Sally. But we want to make sure that each of our children are being challenged and pushed forward. With that thought of assessment, we had 2 of our buildings piloting something called Teaching Strategies Gold. This was a program that came out of the Department of Ed in their initiative to implement full-day kindergarten in as many districts as possible. And it's really a progress monitoring tool. What teachers do is they take a lot of anecdotal data and they document what students are doing. So here are 2 examples, and I see you cannot really read them, sorry about that. But in this one, we have a child who's built a tower structure using 3-dimensional shapes and paper, and the teacher has written down that the child made a castle using three-dimensional shapes. He labeled them and described the cylinder and cones and said, I have 2 squares on my castle. And at the bottom is the specific indicator that the teacher was looking for, which is understands shapes. And so this is a very authentic tool in terms of capturing what children are naturally doing. It's not paper and pencil tasks like we're used to. It's not like that PSAT, but it's capturing what's happening in that moment and documenting the evidence of the learning that you see taking place. So once teachers do this, they often take pictures of the children in action. Sometimes they take videos. Sometimes they are just jotting down notes about what's happened in the classroom. But then they look at each of the pieces of evidence that they've gathered for each of the indicators, and they're looking at where students fall along a continuum. And so the goal is not, did you master this or not, but you're looking at growth over time. So once you've scored them on that continuum, after your collection period, you can look at where that student is falling. So the first box is the first time that a teacher has taken evidence in a particular row. So the first one is notices and discriminates rhyme. And so the first time, the student fell into a 6, which equates to the continuum numbers across the top here. And the second time she gathered evidence, the child had made progress. And the goal is not necessarily to be all 9s, it's really just to look at where that particular student is falling, so we can see what the strengths are for that child and where the areas of need are, so that they can target and build experiences that give that child more exposure. The feedback that we got from the teachers in the 2 buildings who were using it was when they first implemented it, it was scary, it was overwhelming because it's new, and now they're walking around saying, we're going to use this next year, right? And we're all going to use this, and what a valuable tool. And they've learned so much about each of their children as individuals, and it's really helping guide their decision-making in the classroom. So I mentioned the feedback that we gathered from teachers. And these were the areas where we were asking them their thoughts. So the successes, you saw some of those on the accomplishment slides, and as well as the benefits. We were asking them about what was the challenge in transitioning to full day, where should we really be focusing to refine and improve our program, what were the most useful supports that we had, and where do you still need help. And I would love to tell you that the feedback consistently came back that we all need this, but just like our students, all of our teachers are in different places, and it was somewhat varied feedback in terms of the supports that they still need and the things that they wish they had for this year. So we're going to work with them to build ongoing support as we move into next year, especially for those teachers who are going to be picking up and implementing Teaching Strategies Gold for the first time. They actually have the luxury now of in-house experts who've used it this year, so they'll be able to rely on our teachers who've used it this year. The one consistent piece was from the teachers from the 2 buildings that were involved in this pilot. That also went along with something called Kindergarten Seminar, which was a series of full-day workshops through the DOE, and they said they were invaluable in terms of helping them fine-tune and structure the experiences going on in their classroom. So our teachers from our final building picking up the gold assessment will be involved in that seminar as well. And so we'll be able to all sit down and have had that common training and build our conversations and talk about ways that we can refine our approach.
So we haven't just been busy with kindergarten. We've been doing some stuff with 1 to 12 too. So let's discuss that. For curriculum and programs, we've really been doing a lot of work with the instructional support folks, so the reading specialists and basic skills instructors. We've also set up a skills continuum where we were trying to ascertain, with the help of the staff, where the expectation is for students in a given area. So for example, in mathematics, is it consistent across the board that all third grade teachers feel that their students should be able to master a certain level of performance with fractions by the end of the grade? And if so, what level are we talking? Or do they notice that their students might be struggling with that at some point during the year? Is that a tough concept for them, or is that an easy concept for them? And being able to kind of pinpoint those things so that when we get together and we're writing curriculum, we've already had those initial discussions and kind of felt our way through all the different ways that we could write it and different levels that we could pick, and realizing that the students are going to be at different places at any one given time in a given class. So when we write the curriculum, while it is a paper document, it needs to be employed in a way that is fluid enough to accommodate the students and their particular level of skill in a given concept on a given day. So that's what the idea of a continuum is that it's not so much, the skill level and all the students have to, jump this bar every week and just keep going, and if you can't do it, tough, but that we understand that they're all at different places at different times and how to address that in our curriculum documents. So what Christine and I did was we grabbed the best practice called Understanding by Design, and we trained the staff on that process. And a few of them had already had experience with it. So when we walked them through that in January, we had all the best hopes in the world that we would immediately be able to turn around over those next few Mondays and start meeting with the staff and working on, I think we already chosen math and literacy or something. We already had like a whole exact plan of where we were going to go. And then Mother Nature decided to take away our next 3 Mondays and completely threw all of our plans up in the air. So we've been walking through with the staff as many of the different areas as we can, but what we've determined is we're going to need to sit down with them in groups by grade or by discipline to make sure that they not only have a good understanding of this process, since now it's all the way back to January from when we last really looked at it for some of them, but that they also have an understanding together of just the general scope and sequence of the course. So we've begun tackling that this year, and we have plans on tackling that with other areas over the summer and beyond, we'll get into, but just to give you a couple of examples of what we've already been able to produce this year, we just recently sat down with the middle and high school math teachers, and we wrote a scope and sequence out for Algebra 1, and we have plans to do Algebra 2 next week, and we're looking to do geometry as well by the end of the school year, such that when they come back next year, as they're following through on that scope and sequence, the idea is that the teachers are going to be thinking about what are the enduring understandings, what are the essential questions, what are those other components that would flesh out to make a whole curriculum, and then be in a much better position to write that out as they have finished each unit, to be able to do that when it's fresh. For 6th grade, they're in a bit of an interesting situation, as I discussed with you guys way back last fall. With the next generation science standards coming into play, they consider middle school to be 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And here, of course, in Saddlebrook, the elementary schools are K-6. So the 6th grade teachers, when I initially met with them, they were giving me some different pictures of what they were doing in 6th grade science. So in the interest of what John was alluding to before, consistency, and also to plan ahead for the next generation science standards, we began having all the 6th grade teachers teaching elements of earth and space science this year, so that the students who are going to be coming into 7th grade will now have had at least a good chunk of what they need to understand in terms of those next generation science standards worth of earth and space science, so that more of the time can be focused in 7th and 8th grade on life and physical science respectively. So with the idea that then this next year's 6th grade will then have had the whole thing, and then they'll be able to focus entirely on life and physical science. So we're trying to kind of iron that one out, and again, like we were saying, these do take time to kind of address these issues, so we wanted to get a jump on that since that's going to affect the way that science is taught and how we address these next-gen science standards, which we need to do over the next couple of years to comply with the state. All right, so instruction and assessment. As far as the Common Core state standards and the PARC, we recognized pretty quickly that we also needed to focus on making sure that the teachers had the resources that they needed in order to prepare our students as best they could for the PARC exams. Again, realizing that nobody had taken these before, so it was actually one of the first things that we did was we gave the teachers the opportunity to take a PARC practice exam. And a number of them already had, and we could tell because those are the ones who already were having the day's look before they even started, and then all the rest of us had a day's look by the time we were all done and experienced that. And then what we did was we had a number of training opportunities, both in-house and there were some opportunities offered by the state for us to get a better understanding of the structure of the PARC, the expectations, and how we can best prepare the students. And then off of all of that, we took all of that input and created shared folders in Google Apps so that all of our teachers had access to resources out there for both the PARC and for test items from similar types of exams, such as Smarter Balance. So there are lots of other resources out there, and it takes a while to kind of hunt for them. And that was one of the big items of feedback that we had from the teachers, was that they just don't have all the hours of the day to be hunting for all that stuff all the time. So we put together a pretty comprehensive set of resources for them. As far as instruction and assessment, we also began the process of discussing with and training the staff on balanced literacy. We have the DRA and the IRA for grades 3 and 4 respectively. We also spent a significant amount of time with the English department on text-dependent questions. And then the K-6 staff were introduced to the literacy portfolio that was developed, again, in collaboration with them throughout this year. A few more particulars before I move on, because I know there's more your way.
Literacy portfolio, I'll save. I'm coming back next month, and I'll give you detailed information on that. But as Chris was saying, that the text-dependent questions really came out of our work looking at PARCC and preparing for that. So we started talking about instructional practices that should be happening on a routine basis that naturally would help prepare for students for what those expectations were. The DRA and IRA are connected to the literacy portfolio, so again, I'll keep you waiting until next month. But the balanced literacy work this year was truly an introduction level. We talked about what that framework looks like and what the components are, and when we get to our looking ahead slides, you'll hear a little bit more about that and what the ongoing plan as we transition teachers to incorporating them into the classroom will be.
And then one of the other things that we heard about loud and clear was the need for time for the teachers to sit down together and to be able to discuss all these issues, be able to tackle them together. So a couple different ways that we managed this was through both giving them time to sit down for vertical articulation, as in across the grades, so having, say, K-3 sit down about a particular topic, 4-6 or 7-9, but also horizontally across the disciplines within a grade. So just for a couple of examples, vertically we've been discussing these next generation science standards, which I mentioned briefly before, about how we're going to be tackling them K-12. The alignment of skills, which is like earlier in terms of the skills continuum. And then if you notice, this is a consistent theme, consistency, promoting greater consistency vertically across the grades. Likewise, in terms of horizontal articulation, being able to get all of the, say, 6th grade teachers together to discuss this new Earth and Space Science curriculum that we're going to be implementing, that we began this year. That was something that is helping to promote greater consistency and helping to align with performance standards and skills for science in 6th grade. But we've also been discussing interdisciplinary activities. So we had, say, all the science, technology, and math teachers 7 to 12 have had time to get together this year to discuss ways that they have tackled some of the math practices in the Common Core State Standards for Mathematics and some of the cross-cutting concepts of the next generation science standards that are coming due soon, where they're noticing, hey, look at that, we all need to be pursuing opportunities for students to, say, explore patterns and pattern recognition. Okay, well, what are you doing for patterns in 9th grade science? Okay, this is what I'm doing for Algebra 1. And having those discussions has proved to be very fruitful for being able to gain a wider understanding, not only of the expectation of the students for a particular discipline, but the expectation across the disciplines for a given grade for a student. Okay, so looking ahead, we have a pretty ambitious agenda here. So for next school year, we're going to be beginning the science alignment to the next generation science standards for K-5. We've already had some initial discussions of how we're going to do this 6 to 12. Again, 6th grade's kind of being the pace car for that, as they have to change the most. But 7 to 12 now, knowing what 6th grade is going to do, has also begun to figure out how they're going to align themselves with the next generation science standards. Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2, as mentioning, we're going to have a scope and sequence, which helps to pave the road for a full-on curriculum revision for them for next year. That it'll be much more easier for them to do in pieces if necessary. And then the K-6 training series on balanced literacy components, as Christine mentioned, she had the introduction this year. It'll come into play much more next year as well. And then interdisciplinary instruction opportunities, 7 through 12 for the humanities, and using assessment data in instructional decision making.
I always have more to say, sure.
Go for it. So I know you had thinking of something that you want to say.
So thinking about our balanced literacy components, as I said, teachers got an overview, and next year we're going to do an ongoing series of specific training. So, for example, Writer's Workshop is something that a process that began before I started. That's one of the major components of balanced literacy. So next year we will have our K1 and 6 teachers involved in that training, and then by the end of the year we'll have all of our elementary staff up and running with the Writer's Workshop approach. But there's also Reader's Workshop and word study and shared reading and several other components, and we're going to do specific trainings for each of those so that teachers get an in-depth understanding and begin to implement those practices in their classrooms, which will help support our students' instruction. As I mentioned when I was talking about full-day kindergarten and how Teaching Strategies Gold really focused our teachers' thinking in terms of instructional decision-making. That's really where we're headed, and when I talk to you next month about our literacy portfolio, that'll be a tool that will help teachers in all grades gather that sort of information on our students and really drive the instruction that's taking place. And so we really would like this to be the emphasis of what we're doing, where we're gathering real-time information on where students are performing so that we can make the best possible decisions about the experiences that should be happening in our classrooms to spur their growth as much as possible. And then the K-12 piece actually leads us into our next slide, where we're going to be talking a little bit about our plans for curriculum development. But with our history courses going through a resequencing over the last several years, our language arts courses didn't necessarily keep pace. So there have been a lot of conversations about realigning what our focus is in our ELA classes at the middle school, high school, so that there are many more opportunities for that cross-curricular approach where students can really have a broader perspective and be studying a particular time period and looking at literature that also deals with that particular time period. Just helps make a more cohesive experience for our students.
I was going to say, you the first two, go ahead.
Sure. So with that work that had already been done with our history courses, where they've already resequenced, they were at a point, as Chris mentioned, we were hoping come January, after we do our initial training, that we'd have groups up and writing curriculum. Well, I'm happy to say, because of all that work that had already happened with our middle school, high school history department, they have been doing that work. So the last several early dismissal days, that has been what their focus has been, is actually creating the curriculum documents and fleshing out and talking about what the focus is and what are those essential questions that students are going to be wrestling with in those particular courses. So they are probably our group that's the furthest along in that work. So we will continue that. And our English department, as I mentioned, we're trying to make those connections. We started conversations about novels that we currently have and maybe how we can reorganize them and move what grades they're happening in so there's much better alignment. That's also going to be our focus next Monday, and we hope to walk out with a good picture of where we want to head in terms of being able then to design our curriculum based off of those connections.
All right, for 9 to 12 math, I mentioned that we got a start with doing the scope and sequence for Algebra 1. We're going to do an Algebra 2 next week, and we hope to have geometry done by the end of the year, so that as the teachers leave for the summer, they already have a very good idea of a rough pacing guide, if you will, of where they need to be by when with their students, so that then as they go through, they can have specific activities that are planned for that, and that gives them the summer to prepare for that. The 6th grade science, like I said before, the scope and sequence, the earlier we can provide these teachers with a rough idea of where they should be by when, with which type of concepts, same thing, so that then over the summer they can be preparing to be able to hit the ground running in the fall. K-6 math and ELA is going to be kind of like our big summer plan to be able to make sure that we have revised curricula in place for all of those grade levels. Hopefully we have a good chunk of kindergarten sort of already done after everything that you heard what we've been doing with full day kindergarten this year. They should have a pretty good idea of the types of activities and the pacing that they need to show in their curriculum documents for that. And then one of the innovative things that we've developed for the students in terms of the college and career readiness that reflects in the curriculum instruction are the intro courses in STEM, humanities, and global leadership. And these trimester courses would be given to the 8th grade students so that they have kind of a menu or a suite of options presented to them as far as what they can explore when they get to the high school the next year and what they can explore in terms of careers. And one of the things that I mentioned, I'm sure you remember from the vision and the introductory presentations that we made earlier this fall, was that I was very passionate about making sure that students had as many different opportunities to be exposed to college and careers as possible. Not only to help them to choose, but to help them to understand maybe what they thought they were interested in, but really aren't when they actually go about exploring it, right? So I'm sure that I'm among the minority in the room here who actually knew what they wanted to pursue in college way back before I was even out of elementary school. I don't know how, but like I had this illness called Weather-Beating disease where I wanted to study meteorology, and that's what I've always had a passion for doing in terms of the science aspect of it. And now I've turned that into an educational career. So I think that's very important for students to have exposure to as many different career options as possible so that they can see, oh, I never thought of it that way. I really do kind of like that whole biomimicry idea, and maybe I do, maybe bioengineering isn't so hard. Maybe I do have a passion for that. Or I thought I did, and I really liked, pick an animal, lizards, butterflies, whatever. But, now that I'm getting through middle school and into high school, I'm starting to tackle these classes, I think I'm more for finance and not really so much into this, right? That's the kind of thing that helps us to define ourselves as adults, right? As adult professionals, and that's something that we need to make sure that we're providing very good opportunities for the students to be exposed to that. And so these courses will help all of our students as they're coming out of the middle school. So they've already had a bit of a taste of these 3 areas so that when they're choosing electives and when they're choosing what their career path is going to be, we'll rest assured that we've given them this opportunity. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Through the chair. It sounds like you have a very excellent and very good success with the kindergarten and the programs, the GOLD programs that you've instituted. Are there continuation programs of that will follow these students in the first and through elementary school to kind of keep a continuity and consistency to the way they've begun?
As we start exploring, I'm going to speak ELA, sorry. As we further explore the components of balanced literacy and what those structures will be and how they will play out in primary and intermediate classrooms, there will be a very continuous flow of experiences for students. So in our kindergarten classrooms, I mentioned centers and free choice time, which is a little less structured center experience for students. But our first grade students will expect to see similar structures in place in terms of hands-on experiences, exploring through centers, managing their time, and that will build over time into a reader's workshop model where students are going to have to be setting personal reading goals and then using that time to work towards those. So I think what we're putting in place in kindergarten is step 1, and it's the foundation that will be expanded in the following grades.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I have a question. Part of the presentation, you had said that part of the evidence-based data that was collected were through photography and videos of the students, I guess, doing their thing. Do parents have to give permission or anything like that
It's a closed, secure environment. The pictures are not for publication. They're not readily available on the web. It's a password-protected site, so the intent is not for distribution in any way, shape, or form.
But are parents still informed, or?
I believe information.
They are. Okay.
Yeah.
We had to sign something too.
Okay. Thank you.
No question too about the goal. My only thing, having been a parent and teacher going through it this year,
is that I don't feel like we got enough feedback on it. They've only had one report card all year.
Agreed. And that was part of the conversation we had about how are we sharing this information with parents. And when conferences came around, it was early in the year, and teachers weren't very familiar with the system, so some were able to generate reports and talk about and share with parents, and others didn't feel comfortable. So when we were talking initially about sharing information with parents and what does that look like, we had assumed that we were going to be building this from the ground up. And I recently had a conversation with the representative from the DOE who told me that Teaching Strategies Gold is actually in the works of creating a report card that will pull information right from the system to populate, that you can use it 3 times a year, and it will be ready to launch in July. So once we see that tool, we're hoping that our plan is to use that as our kindergarten report card, so that hopefully we'll get much more feedback. Well, if you're not a kindergartner, but other parents of kindergartners will have that.
Any other questions? Thank you for your presentation. Appreciate it.
Yeah, obviously, what you talked about tonight, 2 of our major goals were about professional development, full-day kindergarten, and where we were with our curriculum documents in terms of CUSAC. That was something we had to do too. And so I thank you for sharing all this tonight, but as hard as it may be to believe, all of this work which has gone on all year was really just a fraction of what has happened in our curriculum and instruction department, and with you and all the work of all of our teachers. So thank you for everything you're doing that, like I said to Mr. Lawler, is moving us in the right direction. In student services, if there's any questions or comments on any of those items? Curriculum is a list for approval of just what was just spoken about, our K-6 curriculum writing for this summer. Rates based on the SBEA contract. Business and board outside of the professional development, the workshops number 1 and number 2. The majority of these items are annual approvals for the 15-16 school year. And that goes really through all the way through the end, through number 35. Number 36 is the approval of a change to a different prescription coverage for our employees. But everything up to that point after workshops are 15-16 approvals. Any questions on any of those?
That was up to what number? 30?
35. 28, 29 are the rates for the camps. That was reviewed in policy committee.
Through the chair, on these summer programs, are they just for Saddlebrook students? Residents? No. So the preschool, which is through the community school as well, is just for Saddlebrook, but
well, it's not necessarily through the community school. I mean, we don't really operate as a community school anymore. Community school typically are adult programs, things like that. So, we just now have these independent programs. The Washington School, as a district, operates this integrated preschool program, right? That is just for our residents. Our summer camps is more of a recreation.
So it's open to
and that is open to all
okay.
That's correct.
Okay, we're going to have a report on Wednesday from our chairperson on policy. Other committee reports. Steve, negotiations. Mr. Quinn?
Negotiations is still moving along fine. We'll have the next meeting of the negotiating committee with the association on
27.
The 18th.
Mr. Acabando, Building and Grounds, please.
Yes, we had a meeting on the 29th. Present was President Garrick, Ms. Sanchez, Mr. Singh, Keith Saraki, Mr. Karate, and Mr. Katz. What was brought up was bathrooms for the high school for the referendum. Once the abatement is started in the summer, they'll get working on those. Smith School field and high school field are being used a lot, so it's the grass isn't growing too much, so it's going to be hard for the graduations. Could affect the graduations. We talked about the use of the softball field for the 30th, for the tournament, and the reasons why it was denied was because last year there were propane tanks used on the field, consumption of alcohol, complaints by the residents, double parking, and there was empty beer bottles and trash left all over the place. And talked about having shared services with the DPW as far as paper products and field maintenance. And that's it for now.
Any correspondence? Old business?
Well, our goals update is very much wrapped into the presentations that we had tonight. The kindergarten, we heard about the professional development goal, we heard about the guidance goal related directly to the PSATs and the APs. So that was really the bulk of our updates, which were kind of the our end of the year reports on those.
No old business. Any new business? Okay, seeing none. Open the meeting to the public, may I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Does anyone wish to address the board? I'm just going to read the statement, okay? Residents are requested to state their names, addresses, and subject matter. In the event it appears the public comment portion of the meeting may exceed 45 minutes, the presiding officer may limit each statement made by a participant to 5 minutes duration. Issues raised by members of the public may or may not be responded to by the board. All comments will be considered. Any response will be forthcoming if and when appropriate. The board asks that members of the public be courteous and mindful of the rights of others when speaking. Specifically, comments regarding students and employees of the board are discouraged and will not be responded to by the board. Students and employees have specific legal rights afforded by the laws of New Jersey. The board bears no responsibility, nor will it be liable for any comments made by members of the public. Members of the public should consider their comments in light of the legal rights of those affected or identified in their comments and be aware that they are legally responsible and liable for their comments.
Jennifer Bean, 400 East Saddle River Road. I guess a lot of parents at Smith School are kind of confused right now. I know I can't say staff members' names, but we've been informed that pretty much one of the most favorite teachers in our school is being moved to another school. It's heartbreaking because she's one of the top 3 teachers my child has come across in her experience at Smith School, and I was really hopeful that my younger daughter would get to experience time with her as well. She's also, speaking from a PTO perspective, one of 2 teachers that we can consistently count on to be at our events and functions. I guess we're just kind of wondering what the process was, being as this particular teacher is not a new hire, has been there a while, and how it was, what the process was in her being selected to be the one that was moved to another school. I am aware we are over a teacher after this year, because my daughter is in a big class. I do know that. Just wondering why this particular teacher was the one chosen.
I will. Right, that's correct.
Just for the record, we really, really love her, and we really are very sad to be losing her.
Thank you.
Hello, Marilyn Masello, 152 Claremont Avenue, Saddle, of course. Quick question, C9. The public copy shows 628 plus 13,000. Is that what you have in your paperwork for Wednesday?
C
we have 15,000.
15,
Third,
9 through 12?
6 through 8.
it's 13.
Because
13.
kindergarten is 13.5, then 1 through 5 is 14.5, but then 6 through 8 drops down to 13,000. I would have thought that would have been 15,000, and then 9 through 12, 15.5. So I don't know if that's, I don't ever remember that being lower, I always remember that being a consecutive, like, increase. So,
We'll take a look at it.
It's
like
been
I said, I don't know if
like,
it's
it's been like that, follows the state rates, which are certified through our budget. And
So it's
enrollment.
the state rates, okay, yeah, because I was wondering too with kindergarten, if that's off of state or if that's something that we're also looking at, because now we have full-time versus half a day. So I don't know if that's the right rate anymore either, so I don't know if that was something looked at, but I just had a question as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take a look at it. Anyone else? Motion to close the meeting to the public.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Yeah, I'll speak to that question. I mean, again, I can't really speak about an individual person, so I can kind of give you a general answer, which is really what the actual answer is. That we look at, as you said, there was one less teacher. There was a bubble section, right? 3 in the 6th grade, so Smith School needed one less teacher. Franklin School had a vacancy, so we were actually fortunate not to have any reduction in force and be able to retain all of our staff members because there were no issues, and we wanted to do that. The reason really we look at the whole staff at Smith, the whole staff at Franklin. We work with our obviously building leadership and see who would be the best fit to move, who can we accommodate their spot at Smith, and that's really where we ended up because we thought that for both schools, I mean, it's a loss. Anytime you lose any teacher, it's going to be a loss. But we thought that for both schools, we could make it work with that. So I know that's not a very detailed answer, but it's really just looking at it holistically and trying to make sure that both schools will be able to function the best they can. I understand.
Motion to go into closed executive session to discuss personnel contract negotiations and matters covered by the attorney-client privilege for NJSA 1046, except Open Public Meetings Act. The subject matter discussed may be disclosed to the public if and when the need for confidentiality no longer exists. Actions may be taken when the board reconvenes in open session. Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.